it's a wonderful opportunity for us to go live on our Facebook and on our YouTube to capture this moment, because I love fishing stories, and I think most people like fishing stories. Thank you, Mr. Nico, for joining us in studio.
Pleasure. My fishing story is about my sister, and it got her a front page newspaper photograph. She loves seaside holidays, and once a year she migrates to a cottage on the beachfront and just enjoys chilling out there. And on this particular year, that village organized a fishing competition. And as usual, all the men and fishermen, it's usually men who pitch, appeared with their huge rods and their fancy bait and their secret of how they're going to catch fish. And they duly participated in the fishing competition. She went for a walk in the sea right up to her knees, and a fish swam by. It swam, weighed 20 kilograms.
What?
So she walked out to the tent where the judges were, presented her fish, and they were a bit confused because she'd hand caught the fish. The rules didn't say how the fish has got to be caught. It was clearly still alive, so it wasn't a dead fish.
Yeah, she couldn't have cheated.
She didn't cheat. They weighed it. It was over 20 kilos. It was the record for being caught at that beach. It was also the record for being caught in that competition. So there she stood with her fish, being caught,
How incredible is that?
record, and of course everybody trying to smile and wondering why it is that a woman beat the men at fishing
Without a fishing rod.
without a fishing rod,
anything.
without anything else. Now, what has this got to do with the budget? It does actually have to do with the budget, because she was not the expert on that beach.
Yeah.
And she was able to come out tops.
Yeah.
Now, every year we have a budget in South Africa, and then people like me, we end up predicting what's going to happen. And people often wonder how we do it. Now, it's really quite a simple technique, because yes, the minister has fancy computers. He has a horde of people who help him, and he has more than a year to prepare for what he's going to do. But we know how much debt that the government has.
Yeah, we as a country have got masses of debt.
And we know what the cost of that debt is. We know what the government of national unity wants to spend projects on, because the ministers gossip and they speak out in public. So we have an idea of where they're wanting to go. So we can guess the cost of that debt as well. Now, we know how the government raises taxes because we have access to that information. And we know what new avenues are available because they have to warn us about that 6 months before the budget is spaced. So we've got a lot of information. And we also know which taxes are going to be new. So really, it's elementary, my dear Watson, as Sherlock Holmes would have said. And then that is also why these heads of parties are able to comment immediately after a budget speech, because they've got the same information that analysts like myself have. And we brief them, so they're able to make their comments immediately after. So what happened yesterday that the speech had to be postponed? Now, it was quite simple. There was a disagreement. And if that speech had been made, there has got to be a vote. And one of the biggest parties in the government of national unity would have voted against. And with the opposition parties would have had the majority of the votes. And that would have then brought about the end of the government.
Okay.
So there was no ways the budget could have been read out. Now, was there a way of avoiding that? Of course, there was a way of
Yeah.
avoiding that. But as usual, this was the first year of the government of national unity, and the presidency and the ANC had to learn an important lesson. Because up to now, what would have happened is the president calls the cabinet together on the morning of the budget and says, by the way, this is what we're going to do.
Oh,
And they say, yeah, boss, thank you. But you can't do that if it's as contentious as this one.
yeah.
And you cannot do that if all the ministers are not of your party. They're just going to say, no, we never signed up for this. And that's exactly what happened. So by the early morning already, we knew there was a problem because we can also track who's who and where. They're not making their way to Parliament. They're still stuck. So now we know there's a problem. And then rumors start coming out. And those rumors we can see, yes, we knew there was going to be an increase in VAT. It was probably going to be more than the 1% which we were expecting. So that was not the only fight, by the way, but I'm not going to touch the other one. I'm only going to deal with that one because that's in public space.
Yeah.
So that is where the delays came. So now, what was it that parties learned yesterday? The first issue is this is a government of national unity. No single party can decide what's going to happen anymore. There's got to be consensus. And that lesson is what the ANC has now learned. Now, before the ANC starts phoning me and saying I'm criticizing, I criticize you, I criticize the DA, I criticize them controversies where I criticize without exception.
Yeah.
If you do something wrong, we have a right in this country to comment on that. That doesn't mean you're evil, it just means you made a mistake. The ANC has realized, which is why that speech has not been happened. What our president now has to do is to find consensus. He's really good at that. That's what makes him better than most other presidents that we've had before. And he will find consensus. It is clear that a 2% VAT increase is unacceptable for our country. We can't afford it. So he's going to have to reduce that increase, and he's going to have to give a better list of VAT-exempt items to make it acceptable for people who are on the breadline. So that's going to have to happen. That's going to take time. Now, before you start saying, this is typical of South Africa, yes, it was embarrassing for us. But I'd like to remind those who want to just criticize our country by referring to America. They read out their budget speech anyway, and then they have their fight. And in the last couple of years, it's got so bad that they've had to send their public servants home for up to 53 days.
What?
Because there was no money. They couldn't actually get the thing signed off.
Whoa.
So if you want to say that's only chaos here, welcome to those South Africans who are about to seek political asylum in America. Because that is going to happen this year in the States. Because some of the contentious changes that president wants to bring about are not going to pass muster. They're going to have a similar problem out there. And then he's going to have to learn to negotiate. So it happens there, it happens here. So what are you going to have to do here in South Africa? You know some taxes are going to go up. If you want to participate, start buying now because it's going to go up. VAT is going to have to go up. If you want to buy a car costing more than $1 million, you're going to get a double whammy because that's going to increase and there's going to be an extra tax on your luxury car as well. So you need to go and get that sorted out. Unfortunately, petrol tax will also go up.
No.
Yes. So you're going to have to get used to that as well.
Ouch.
What is the good news? we're negotiating. And it's a mistake that's going to be a one-off.
Okay.
Any comments anybody wants to ask me here?
I think for me, the one thing I wanted to ask was there was one of the political leaders, namely Julius Malema, who was saying after the postponed budget speech, he was saying that this is a sign that the GNU is crumbling and that it's failing. What would you say to that?
If he didn't say that, I would say, Julius, what's wrong? He's not a legal expert.
Yeah.
He has to say something.
Okay.
He's got his couple of seconds, and he has a right to say that.
Okay.
But there's certainly nowhere can he quote any constitute or any item in the Constitution, or can he quote any statute that gives him a right to say that.
Okay. And then lastly, do we believe and do we see that government will actually say we as government need to cut our spending within government? John Steenhuisen also, after the postponement was announced, he said that he personally has used rather an old car rather than purchasing a new car. Things like that, basics.
So why can't they cut?
Yes, what we're going to have to cut is a couple of billion. Using a second-hand car is a nice thing to impress your voters.
But it's not going to help us.
It's not going
billions.
to make a difference. And that's where we're going to have to do. But our biggest issue right now is we've got to get the cost of debt down. If we can get the cost of government debt down, in other words, the inflation figure and also the cost of debt, then that will save us a couple of billion rand. Then that makes a lot more possible. So we do need to do some more negotiating. And quite frankly, I'm glad I'm not amongst those experts who is not going to get any sleep for the next 3 weeks.
True.
While we tweak those figures.
Yeah. And the new date has been set for the budget speech, if I recall correctly, or is it to be verified?
It's got to be verified.
Okay.
Because we've got to get the figures together. We've got to get them to work. We can't have a repeat of this mess that we have right now. But unless we get our growth rate above 3% by the end of next year, none of the dreams are going to come together. And with this VAT increase, there was no ways we were going to get anywhere near that.
Sure. No, exactly. Nico, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. I think we will definitely make sure to get you in again once the date has been settled.
Yeah.
And maybe have a conversation then and a further conversation definitely after the fact. But thank you so much, Nico. Appreciate it.
Okay.